Hi, I'm Earl Taylor, Chief Knowledge Officer at the Marketing Science Institute. As many of you know, MSI helps marketers become better marketers. Our business and academic thought leaders collaborate to create new marketing knowledge, which we share in a variety of ways. One of the most popular is our online lecture series. Those of you attending today represent many business sectors such as technology, financial services, CPG, media, and more, as well as MSI members such as Salesforce, Adobe, Kantar, Vanguard, and others. We're delighted to welcome you to learn more about account-based marketing. Now, before we begin, I'd like to point out the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please use this feature to send through any questions you have during the presentation. We'll gather the questions and have a brief Q&A session following the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce you to today's featured speakers. Wes Johnston is Executive Director of the Center for Business and Industrial Marketing in the Robinson College of Business at the Georgia State University. He's also a professor of marketing there and teaches courses in sales management, business-to-business marketing, customer relation management, and other topics. Professor Johnston's research interests include areas such as key strategic account management, account-based marketing, and business-to-business marketing. He's written 9 books. Google Scholar lists him as the current leader in citations for research in sales management and third in sales. He's consulted with any number of companies, including MSI members such as AT&T, DuPont, and UPS, and he's taught executive MBA programs in many schools literally around the world. So we're very pleased to have Wes with us today. Before coming to Georgia State, he was at the University of Southern California and the Ohio State University. Craig Apatov is managing partner at Ascension. He's a 3-time chief marketing officer and possesses 20 years of experience in strategic marketing, general management, and consultative business development for multiple Fortune 100 companies. His experience includes senior-level executive roles at ConAgra Foods, Citibank, GM, Mattel, Time Warner, and the Walt Disney Company. And his colleague, Ingles, is managing partner at Accenture, is former brand manager at Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola Company. And his experience includes building renowned brands in areas such as consumer products, retail, manufacturing, industrial manufacturing, and financial services industries. So we're very pleased to have all three with us today to talk to us about using account-based marketing strategies to accelerate key account revenue production. So take it away, guys.
Thank you, Earl, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Wes Johnston, and as Earl indicated, professor at Georgia State University and also a consultant with Ascension. I'll kick off today's presentation, and Craig and Chip will then join me as we move forward. And these are the points we're going to be covering today. We'll define account-based marketing, or ABM. We'll look at how key account management and ABM can generate significant revenue growth. Oftentimes in working with key account programs, I find that they need revitalization, and ABM is a great way to do that. We'll then look at the need for targeting specific individuals in accounts, and also then putting together, once we understand the contact points and the influence within the account, then we'll look at how to put content marketing together and direct it to them. We'll talk about targeted distribution, ABM technologies, and Chip will show us a number of ways to stack the ABM technologies, and then we'll end up with metrics of success, and then finally look at some of the pitfalls that can occur when you're putting together and managing an account-based marketing program.
I'm Craig Apatov, and I'll give you a quick overview of Ascension before we jump in. Ascension is a 17-year-old management consulting firm based in Atlanta. Our focus is helping clients around the world drive profitable organic growth and improve business performance improvement. And the strategic and tactical aspects of account-based management, account-based marketing, are very much a part of what we do for our clients on a day-to-day basis. Our approach generally encompasses what we call the 4 levers of profitable top-line growth. Analytics, sort of the financial dimensions of profitable growth. Insight mining, or full-service marketing research services. Marketing, everything from demand generation, strategic positioning, all the way down to program development and execution. And finally, sales enablement, consultative sales team assessments, compensation programs, and workshop-based training programs. We work with a broad range of clients across many different industry verticals, so we're both in the B2C and the B2B worlds with our clients.
So there's our presentation team for today. Chip Ingles is our thought leader on ABM. And interesting fact about Craig, how I met him was through Georgia State, where he was the chairman of the Georgia State University Marketing Roundtable, and he has been a member of the Marketing Roundtable for 25 years, and he continues to be today, and me. So let's move forward. Craig, you want to give us some background on ABM?
So exactly what is account-based marketing? Forrester Research estimates that up to 99% of traditionally generated inbound leads fail to become customers ultimately. Account-based marketing, or as we will refer to it today, ABM, is the process of defining, targeting, and nurturing relationships with key influencers and decision makers in high-value or highly strategic accounts. Account-based marketing is a process that works hand-in-hand with key account management in the sales organization. Instead of broad-reaching mass marketing campaigns that touch the largest possible number of prospects, account-based marketing focuses resources on a defined set of specific high-opportunity accounts. It uses customer insights, powerful enabling technologies, and cost-effective digital communication delivery to reach audiences. ABM leverages customized messaging and targeted message delivery platforms to reach and influence the people that we need to say yes about our products and services. Finally, today's CRM systems help enable your new business and account management teams to cultivate ABM-developed relationships. Account-based marketing and key account management work very well together to land new accounts and grow them over time. Historically, a lot of marketing was focused on generating as many inbound leads or hand raisers as possible. The traditional sales funnel narrows at the bottom as the number of marketing and sales qualified leads drops significantly. As we will discuss today, account-based marketing really flips the traditional sales funnel upside down. Instead of starting with marketing channels, ABM starts with a focus on identifying target industries and specific accounts. Account-based marketing then targets multiple executive influencers and/or decision makers within target accounts using customized content designed to generate interest and what we call hand raisers or inquiries. ABM is a relatively new phenomenon. It is believed to have started around 1993 when Don Peppers and Martha Rogers wrote the book The One-to-One Future. The book suggested an imminent shift would occur from mass marketing to more personalized communication programs. In 1999, the advent of the first CRM systems enabled companies to start documenting every touch they had with executives in both prospective companies as well as their current accounts. As we know today, having a robust repository of available information on both customers as well as prospects in your CRM systems is an invaluable aid in lead generation and new business sales prospecting. By 2016, the first books on account-based marketing were beginning to hit the newsstands. But by any measure, account-based marketing is still in the early stages of development. ABM is a great way to revitalize existing key account management programs as well. Why would a company consider using account-based marketing? There are many reasons a company might consider ABM. They may want to launch new products and generate awareness in advance. They may want to preempt competition. They may want to expand their market share within an industry or expand their wallet share within an existing account. They may want to target new markets or segments, industry verticals, we often call them. Finally, they may want to grow in a high-value specific account and target specific executives where they'd like to do more for a particular company. We think of account-based marketing as more of an upstream business activity. ABM can start before customers have formed a relationship with your company. It is designed to win you new customers and help manage existing ones. ABM focuses on understanding, targeting, and onboarding new accounts to your organization. Key account management is more of a downstream activity. It really starts after you've acquired the account and want to expand or deepen your relationship with them. Thus the concept of expanding your wallet share. ABM represents the strategic integration of timely, purposeful marketing messages targeted at specific executives designed to influence their research, shopping, and buying processes.
Good afternoon. I'm Jip Ingles, and I'm going to talk for just a little bit about the demonstrated impact that ABM has had in the marketplace versus traditional marketing programs, and also how they're structured and organized differently. First, let's take a look at some results, and this sort of underscores the reason why ABM is a topic of great interest in the marketing community these days. Some benchmark research that was done just last year tried to measure the impact of ABM programs versus traditional marketing, and showed that over 3/4 of the respondents in the research were experiencing ROIs at least 10% or better than their traditional marketing programs. And in fact, 45%, almost half of them, were experiencing ROIs that were twice as high as they were getting with traditional marketing. So the reality is that done properly, ABM can be a very effective and impactful strategy to follow for your marketing programs. So that raises the next question, which is how are they different? And what you see on the slide here are sort of two sales funnels, and they look like they're inverted. That's by design. On the left is really the traditional sales funnel, where you start with a great number of suspects, prospects, whatever you want to term. On the left-hand side, folks you don't know, aren't customers of your company. And the objective really through the sales funnel and the marketing process and the sales process is to turn those suspects into customers. It's really a penetrate strategy. ABM has a very different philosophy. With ABM, you don't start with a large mass of folks that you don't have any clues to whether they'll be good fits or not, and you do as you work through the funnel. But rather with ABM, you start with a discrete group of high-value accounts. They may either be existing accounts or prospects that you believe are very good fits for your products and services and can provide value to your company. And really what you're trying to do is to radiate within those accounts, grow your business, and engage them more deeply over time in your company, your products, and your services. And some of the differences in terms of the responsibilities the two funnels suggest are that in traditional, you've got some distinctions typically between marketing and sales. Marketing, more often than not, handles the top of the funnel, develops marketing qualified leads, hands it over to sales at the bottom of the funnel, who turn those into customers ideally. In an ABM situation, marketing and sales are integrally linked and have the same goal of driving expanded revenue. The spend is much more focused on an ABM standpoint, and as we talked about, the ROI for ABM has been demonstrated to be much higher than what you see in traditional marketing. So that's kind of a comparison of the two different types. The next slide, what we're seeing now, it's important to understand the role of marketing and sales and the distinctions because in traditional and ABM programs, because setting these up right is absolutely essential. In the traditional, as we talked before, marketing really has responsibility for the top of the funnel, awareness and interest, and sales really has responsibility for closing the deals. In an ABM, marketing has the responsibility for developing awareness and interest, but then they stay involved because they're sharing that joint responsibility for revenue growth within the key accounts with sales all the way through the life of the relationship. So they're providing ongoing air cover, which they typically don't do in a traditional sales arrangement. Sales has responsibility not only for closing the account, but also then for taking the lead and expanding that relationship and growing the account over time. And in an ABM situation, that group is also often, not always, but often supplemented by a customer success team. When you run an ABM program, there are really sort of 8 different steps to the action plan. The first of which is targeting, making sure you can identify the right targets, be they either prospects or customers. The next one that we recommend and use is understanding the current relationship that you have with those prospects or customers. And this is much more obviously important with a customer where you have an ongoing relationship. And you've got to understand how deeply are you engaged right now? Are you sufficient, or does it need some work, and so forth? And Wes is going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. The third step is developing the use cases, figuring out the appropriate applications of your products and services for the needs of the given customer you're trying to pursue. Next is to develop the messaging around the use cases and how to best communicate your products and services to those targets around those use cases. The fifth level is, let's understand what you've got in-house right now that would make sense for you to use, and that leads to the next point, which is to develop a plan for communicating those assets. And the seventh point is, to the extent that they don't exist now, you've got to develop new customized communication that can be shared with prospect companies at ABM accounts. And the last point is the implementation and also measuring and ongoing improvement. We'll talk a little bit more about that. During the balance of our time together, we're going to unpack some of these steps that we just went through and discuss them in a little bit more detail. And to start with that, I'm going to turn it back over to
Craig. So a key part of account-based marketing is obviously targeting specific companies, targeting specific executives. So once we understand the relationship the customer really wants to have with our firm, and Wes will talk more about that, targeting becomes really important. Targeting your message to a specific audience is a critical aspect of ABM. Ultimately, best practice targeting leverages two types of research data that we can pull on both target industries, as well as something we call decision maker profiles. And the kinds of research we look at is firmographic data, or information that's typically available via the public domain, like online searches and what have you, publicly available data. Firmographic data includes company size, annual revenue of the company, number of employees, their key office locations, their industry identification codes, NAICS codes or SIC codes, and also buyer demographic data. This refers to descriptive information on the targeted decision makers by industry or by company. Buyer data includes title, job function, physical office location, the years of experience, and the levels they are removed from the top executives in the organization. As we'll see in a few minutes, politically mapping and understanding the levels of decision-making and influence are very, very key aspects of account-based marketing. Let's look at two ways to build a buyer profile. One way is to think about what we call the influencers or the buyers, decision-maker personas. And buyer profiles are also referred to as key influencer or decision-maker personas. Developing personas is an important step in ABM targeting. It requires marketing and sales to collaborate together and agree on who those targets are. Persona development requires us to ask ourselves who influences and who makes the final buy decisions in the target industries and companies we're looking at. We recommend that you ask yourself 6 key questions when you're building a target persona. Number one is, what are the buyer's priorities? Uncover why buyers act the way they do relative to their decision-making process. Number 2 is success factors. This reveals the buyer pain points or the issues they're having that they'd like to eliminate or improve upon in their buying process. Number 3 is decision-making. Uncover how buyers make decisions, factors in how they use and evaluate competitive options. Next is strategic barriers, revealing brand perception issues that can impact buyer willingness to consider your company. And finally, purchase journey, reveals true decision-maker influencers, and trusted information sources. And this is an example with a few quotes down below from a healthcare client that we work with, we built these personas for them. As you'll see in a moment, having these factors answered will help you personalize your persona and your messaging even further. This is an example of taking sort of those kinds of inputs and creating sort of a picture of the target influencer or decision maker. We recommend building descriptive profiles of target influencers and decision makers, similar to what you see here for a healthcare company. Having personalized buyer profile descriptions and distributing them among your marketing and sales team will aid greatly in content marketing program development and in sales prospecting activities. Note the healthcare executive decision maker in this example tries to create a picture of the full person that we're trying to engage. It attempts to put us in their shoes, and it addresses their motivations, their management style, their decision-making criteria, and other aspects of their personal life. The more we can humanize the target, the more we have a clear feeling from both marketing and sales needs in terms of how to reach them. I'll turn it back to Wes to talk a little bit more about a further level of targeting we call political mapping.
Thanks, Craig. Once the personas are built, then another important aspect of targeting is the political mapping. And we do this to understand the influence patterns and map the connections between the decision makers within the target firm. Now, there's a great book by John Carter, and it's called What Leaders Really Do. And in the book, John talks about three important things to understand it. First of all, changes in organizational dynamics and decision-making require we look beyond titles. And we also, we have to successfully identify the true influencers of the decisions we need or we want to influence to achieve our growth plans. And then finally, this is where political mapping comes in. It's a strategic best practice to drive the ABM programming and focus downstream sales prospecting. So when we think about political mapping, there are 5 things that are really important to understand. Those are the roles, who are the key players involved, access, what level of access we currently have to them, and we would like to get with them, the level of support that each of those key persons provide us with. To what degree are they likely to support our products internally? And importantly, why? Why are they supporters of our products? The fourth point would be the amount of influence. To what extent will they influence decisions for us? Will they act as internal champions for us? And then finally, our current level of coverage with them. How much time have we spent with them, and do we really need to increase that coverage with particular individuals based upon the result of the political map? So we have a proprietary software tool that puts all of this together. And if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the 5 things that I just talked about that we need to measure, and there's different levels or different roles in each of those. Those outline the levels and roles and the amount of coverage we have, the time spent, and those all go together in building the political map.
Talk about the arrows.
So the tool then uses red arrows to map influencers up the chain of command. Those identified with red arrows should be targeted in the ABM communication and also the sales prospecting leads. And typically what we suggest is that when a company is using this political mapping tool is that the territorial sales reps are charged with completing these maps for the top accounts in their territory. In mid-sized firms. In larger firms, in key accounts, then it's the responsibility of the entire key account team. And management, once they're built, then management reviews the territory plans and pays special attention to those key political, the key account political maps. And finally, political maps also can aid sales reps in managing their time. Once we have a map of the account, then the next step is also another software tool that we have. The next step is assessing the relationship that we have with that customer. And so we use a tool, it's a 32-question self-administered assessment tool that we call the Relationship Assessment Questionnaire. And it's broken down into 3 areas that are being measured. And the first is the status of the current business relationship that you have with the account. And some example questions there are, where do you rank compared to the customer's other suppliers? Where do you fit into the customer's plan for the future? And that is how much the customer values and what kind of status they're willing to accord to you. The second issue that the questionnaire measures is how much of an investment have you been making into the relationship? Some of the representative questions there are, where do you spend most of your time with respect to marketing and sales? Are your senior management involved with this account? And then the third issue is measured is the potential to advance that relationship. And as you'll see in a minute, we can plot this on a graph, and there's some, I'll show you some representative examples of different locations in the graph. So as we think about the status that a customer would afford us, we can think of different levels. There's just a transactional level, which is you hold out the product and they hold out the money, and you both grab at the same time, and you have no interest in one another other than you've made an exchange product for money. In that case, you're just considered one in many vendors that are in the industry. But the next higher level is we can think of as a credible source. This is where you're one of the top, say, 10 in the industry, and you're seen as you've been vetted and you're a reliable supplier. Moving even higher is where you've actually solved specific problems for that customer. You're seen as a problem solver and typically puts you into the top 3 suppliers for that account. At the highest level is what we call the trusted advisor. And this is where you're the dominant supplier. Oftentimes, if there's a project coming up, the customer will come to you first and see if you can solve the problem for them without putting out an RFP or anything like that. So the purpose of the ABM program is to build these longer, stronger, and more profitable relationships. Now let's take a look at mapping this. So the 32 questions, the first set of questions map the vertical axis, and the next set of questions map the horizontal axis. What you see there is the first type of relationship. This is transactional. The customer sees you as a vendor, and you're not putting a lot of special activity into that customer through an ABM program or anything. However, as we move up, and the customer wants a higher level of relationship with you, and you also step up to providing perhaps dedicated R&D and specific personnel, maybe your best personnel assigned to that account, particularly in key account program, then you start to reach the enterprise level relationship where you have deep and lasting relationships. Now, anywhere along the line is a good location to be, but if you get off that line, you can get into some problems. For instance, if the customer is just looking for a transactional kind of relationship, and you start investing a lot of resources, effort, time, and specific programs for the customer, and they don't respond to that, you're over-resourcing. And you're spending resources without the customer responding to that. You're probably better off to reallocate those resources to other accounts. Now, fourth position that you can end up is where the customer really wants a long-term relationship, a trusted advisor, and you're not responding to that. You're focusing on product price and ease of doing business with customers. And at that point, you put the customer at risk. The customer is liable to look for a new supplier. And so finally, how does this drive your ABM, your account-based marketing program? Well, at the lowest level, if you have a transactional kind of relationship, and it's not necessarily bad. I did some work for a company that had a large equipment manufacturer, and they were working very hard to build a relationship with them, and the equipment manufacturer wasn't responding. They met with them and they said, we don't want to work with suppliers that way. We want a transactional basis. And so the supplier moved back, stripped out the costs, developed a transactional relationship with that particular customer, and the customer basically doubled the amount of business that they were doing with the supplier. Now, as we move up the line, though, when we start to build a stronger relationship, then we get into the area where we're probably dealing with mid-level executives, managers, the process owner for a particular issue in the company, in the customer, and at that point, we really need to start to add value, and one of the ways to do that is through consultative marketing, where we create new value and we improve processes within the customer firm. And then at the highest level, we move up to where we're creating extraordinary value. We have enterprise-level connections. Companies share the strategic future with one another, and oftentimes it's a good example of this would be Procter & Gamble and Walmart. at one time, Procter & Gamble was in basically a transactional marketing position with Walmart. They didn't like it. They sat down with Walmart, they talked about it, and they moved up to having a much higher level enterprise marketing relationship.
So we've talked about targeting, we've talked about relationship assessment. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the messaging and the content marketing side of reaching specific executives in specific companies. There are a number of different types of content that can be used for account-based marketing. E-books, white papers, podcasts, e-newsletters, electronic newsletters, blog entries, case studies, videos, slideshows, infographics, technical sheets, and curated content. The key to effective ABM programming is to build up a variety of content types for your ABM repository or your catalog. It's also important to rotate those types to increase the likelihood of grabbing the attention of a current customer or prospect, raising their interest, and possibly generating an inquiry. When we think about ABM content personalization, there's a spectrum. It's important to do some research on your target industries and target customers' needs, wants, and problems they're trying to solve. It's also important to understand how messaging needs to change from one influencer or decision maker to the next, either by function or by title. As you can see in this continuum, ABM content can be fairly generic on the left, or it can move to being highly customized, unique and specific to both the account and the individual executive you're trying to reach. This is an example of 4 different types of content for a client we did an ABM program for. They happen to be in the global sourcing business. They happen to be a B2B company, meaning they're sourcing components for large industrial companies from China, Taiwan, and other overseas locations. In today's world, the most common type of ABM content tends to be digital in nature. Here you see videos. Typically, we find between 1 minute to 2 minutes is about as long as you want to be. After that, people tend to not have much attention span for anything longer. Slideshows, which are sort of like electronic PowerPoints that the viewer clicks through at their own pace. Infographics, we've all seen those. And finally, curated content, which you see in the lower right of this slide. Curated content is business relevant and addresses specific identified use cases, but it's not custom. It can be material that others create for social media, but relates to your specific target customer's needs and wants. It's a very cost-effective way to round out your available portfolio of content for your ABM program. As you can see here, all ABM digital content should clearly reference the executive or the company that's distributing it. It should also feature a call to action and a response mechanism. The response mechanisms can take many different forms. Hyperlinks to a page on your company website or a microsite, a digital form fill that asks the contact for specific information so your sales team can follow up, a web address or phone number so they can inquire directly, and finally, with email messaging, the recipient can sometimes simply hit reply, and it will go back to a designated sales contact or specific executive within the company who's fielding those inbound leads. When we talk about ABM content or messaging, there's a few important things to keep in mind. In today's world, nobody wants to be overtly sold. Thus, we recommend that content should be 70 to 80% focused on the identified prospect's interests and 20% focused on your organization or what you have to sell. It's okay to mention or promote your company and your capabilities, but be sure you're providing thought leadership and information that is of value to the customer or the target. ABM content should be designed to be provocative, educational, and compelling to the audience you're trying to reach. Again, we have to avoid the tendency to overtly sell and promote our company, its products, services, and capabilities. Prospects and customers alike often resonate positively with content that's tailored to their industry and their specific job function. We're going to show you a quick example. It's about a 2-minute or so video. That's a sample that we created for the same sourcing company, global sourcing company. The video example is for a B2B focused company, as I mentioned, that provides global outsourced sourcing. It's designed to be informative, educational, and provocative without being too promotional. You'll note the focus of the video is on ways to avoid the negative impact of the U.S. imposed import tariffs on China manufactured components. This is obviously a very topical issue right now, given the U.S.-China trade situation. Let's go ahead and run the video, and then I'll come back. You'll notice the video was provocative and educational. Hopefully it was somewhat informative. And you notice at the end there was a link back to the company that was sponsoring the video. In this case, the company was called Premier Precision Components. So it does have the ability for a response mechanism at the very end. Chip?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. We've talked a little bit about the content marketing and the interest and effort to try to make that as personal and customized as possible. Talk a little bit next about a couple ways and tools to use to help accomplish that. And the first is use cases. Now, use cases is actually a software term, but in the context of ABM, it's really about mapping different ways different customers can derive benefit from your products and services. And one of the tools that commonly used is something like what you'll see in this next slide, where, and this actually is a real life example from somebody we have worked with, that where we took the different use cases, and this happens to be for financial services, in this case uses the working capital, down the left-hand side, there are the various rows that you see in the left column, and map that against a group of different target audiences they were trying to appeal to. Now, obviously, you can see not every use case applies to every audience, but nevertheless, it does give you a perspective of who can use what. Then the next thing that is done, and we had done, is sort of take that and expand it and add a different dimension, which is how do you develop messaging against those audiences for those use cases based on how far along the purchase cycle or the buying cycle the segment may be. So these are a couple of the more advanced tools that are very appropriate for use with ABM. I'll turn it back to Craig for some comments and thoughts about distribution of your marketing message in an ABM program.
Once we have content, we need to distribute it on a regular, recurring schedule. So let's take a look at how we might do that. As you can see in this particular chart, at any given time, only 3 to 5% of your market is actually looking for what you're selling. Thus, it's imperative that we use multiple channels to reach them multiple times throughout the week, the month, the year. Best practice account-based marketing programs tailor message frequency by target company and executive. They use multiple distribution channels, as you see here, from email, direct mail, telesales, etc. Using multi-touch, multi-channel communication is at the center of best practice ABM programming strategy. A monthly or quarterly ABM messaging calendar is critical to drive your program. It'll determine messaging and distribution frequency by audience. Calendars are built in today's digital campaign management platforms, which then automate the delivery process for you. This is an example of a platform that we use to automate targeted social media delivery all the way down to the individual that we're trying to reach, as well as the sponsoring individual from whom the message is coming from at the company. Some campaign management platforms are built into marketing automation systems, while others are available as standalone platforms. We recommend using traditional and digital message distribution. Traditional messaging could include something like direct mail. Digital messaging can be many forms, from email to various types of social media posts. For most companies, we primarily focus on email and LinkedIn in the B2B space. Other companies actually do get great value out of posting on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Next, we're going to make a few comments about the technology to enable marketing ABM programs done at scale. What you see here is just sort of a diagram that shows what we'll call a foundational or basic MarTech stack. Now, a lot of the elements here, if you're doing traditional marketing, you've probably got in place anyway, certainly a CRM and probably a marketing automation platform as well as a CMS. The thing to call out, and that's kind of different, is companies that are doing ABM at scale are also on top of these sits for them, typically some form of ABM marketing technology. The next slide shows some of the leaders for different types of the elements that were called out in the prior slide, and importantly, at the very top, ABM Marketing, Terminus, Demandbase, and Engagio. These are some of the companies that are kind of leaders in this space, but like any other marketing technology, there are a number of them in the marketplace, and finding the right fit for you is dependent on size and needs and what have you. But if you're going to do it at scale, you really need to add that as an investment on top of the MarTech you probably got in place for traditional marketing. And last, from there, let's move over and talk a little bit about performance metrics appropriate for ABM. And here are some key metrics that are often used to evaluate an ABM program. If you look at these, you'll notice that some bear some similarity to some of the metrics you might use in a traditional program, but some are rather different. Coverage. Do you currently have sufficient data, contacts, and what have you in each account? That's something that's rather ABM unique. So is awareness and engagement and program impact. Some of the revenue growth, they're similar to some of the traditional metrics, but you don't have things when you're measuring ABM such as how many suspects do I have at the top of my sales funnel. It's not relevant because you've already determined who your key targets that you're pursuing are. So there are some differences, there are some similarities. And the last slide just simply shows an example of some of the work we have done with clients at Ascension on ABM type programs and some of the reporting and tools that we developed to get at some of the key metrics that help us work with our clients to, and this is key, constantly improve the program. Over time, it should become more and more effective. The longer you run it, the better it will be.
So that brings us close to the end. We thought we'd just throw in a few of the common account-based marketing pitfalls that companies fall into and try to avoid or should try to avoid. And these are those: friction between marketing and sales. It's easy to say marketing and sales should be carefully coordinated, but I've worked with a lot of companies where that's not true. Goals can be unclear with internally, and also maybe the support is misaligned with what the customer really wants. Companies are not sure which accounts to focus on. They don't have the personas, or they haven't done the political mapping. They don't know or can't reach buyers within the focus accounts. They need better marketing communications. They're not delivering relevant, personalized messages or experiences to those that they are contacting within the organization, the customer organization. And also then finally, data and technology is inadequate for the task. We did a study a few years ago for MSI, Russ Weiner and I, and we found that as a bare minimum, companies to carefully coordinate sales and marketing need a CRM system, but there's a lot of other databases that need to go along with that. So these are pitfalls to avoid.
And finally, we just wanted to let everyone on the webinar know that should anyone be interested, our firm does provide 2 strategic development and executional assistance programs for ABM. The first is called ABM Plus, which is a full-service ABM program design, implementation, and ongoing impact analysis reporting program. And the other is specifically a content marketing program we call Content Cast, which includes build-out of an executive database for targeting, ongoing custom and curated content development, targeted digital distribution on a regular weekly, monthly basis, and ongoing impact and delivery analysis. So feel free to please contact any of us on today's webinar if you have any interest in this for your company. We thank you very much for your time today. I believe we have a few minutes left for some questions. Earl, is that correct?
We do, Craig. Thanks very much. That's great. Thanks, all three of you. Very crisp presentation, a lot of good content there, and we do have some questions. I want to start with a question that really happened almost at the very beginning. Ethan had a question about the improved ROI for account-based marketing. Was that primarily from reducing some of the inefficiencies of standard marketing, or was it increased revenue, or perhaps both? So if you could sort of generalize, what is the driver of that increased revenue for those companies that adopt an ABM program?
Yeah, more often than not, the revenue or the benefit, it will be a combination of both. As we had said, typically ABM marketing spend, if done right, it will be less than a traditional marketing program. And it's likely to deliver higher revenue results. So really the impact is a combination of the two.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Kate had a question about some of the free sources you alluded to do some of that mapping, the key contacts, the firmographics. you mentioned a couple of the provider companies that do some of the account-based marketing support. Any other recommendations quickly for where to get started in terms of profiling your target companies?
Well, the easiest and best place is obviously a Google or a Bing search. You can get a tremendous amount of information on companies that way. 10K reports, annual reports, company websites, third-party data sources. There are a lot of them out there. Some charge and some don't for their services. But yeah, understanding as much as you can about your target customer, your target industry, and your target company is vital.
Yeah.
Yeah, and feel free, if you want to comment on your colleague's answer, jump right in. We'll give you a little time for all three of you to respond if you have something to share. I'm going to combine a couple of questions. Yeah, please.
We did a project through the university for a large data storage company, and they found a lot of, as Craig was saying, free online resources in that.
Yeah, I think more and more if you begin to search out, ironically, some of the companies that are putting their own content out there promoting their services might be a good source of what their issues are and how they approach them. I want to combine a couple of questions. One of the audience members pointed out that it's great to be able to identify targets and the buyers and so forth, the decision makers, but actually contacting, getting through the gatekeepers, engaging those individuals can be challenging, especially if your service or offer is disruptive and maybe not that familiar, either the company or the service you're offering. And Nanette had, I think, a similar question, asking if ABM fully encompasses a startup's marketing strategy, or is there a balance between ABM and more traditional brand marketing for a startup? So generally, how do you break through, and maybe specifically in the case of a company that is not as well known or is introducing a disruptive service into the industry?
Chip and I both have a perspective on this. I would say that ideally you will have prospects who are what we call hand raisers. You will be reaching them on a regular recurring basis, as we said, with different types of educational, provocative information that would cause them to actually be interested in you. So that there's less direct prospecting needed and more actually warm receptivity to your inquiry when you make the approach. There's no question getting an audience with the right person is not always easy, but the more you can use ABM to sort of grease the wheels of progress, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, the other comment to sort of build on that, and I think part of the question was ABM versus traditional, and how do you mix the two, or do you not mix the two? They are not really mutually exclusive strategies. They can be run together. Doing so takes a little bit of extra organization and attention, but particularly for firms who are not familiar with ABM or just starting out, a typical strategy, they're running a traditional marketing program. They're going to say, listen, there is a subgroup of very high value accounts. I'm going to really start to run ABM type programs against that group, learn how to do it right, and then the intent would be to expand that out to where eventually I may be ABM dominant, if not exclusive. But you don't have to, right from the get-go, say, I got to go one way or the other. You can run them a little bit in parallel.
Okay, again, that sounds like good advice. I want to come back to a couple of things. Wes, as he wrapped up the presentation, talking about some of the pitfalls. Number one, and this is something that occurred to me early in your presentation, is the traditional tension between marketing and sales, given the very different roles that they play in traditional marketing. But as you indicated, account-based marketing really tries to integrate those two functions. What is the key to making that integration work? Maybe restate something you shared earlier, or any other observations about overcoming that traditional tension between marketing and sales.
Collaboration is key. The more the two functions can, at least leadership can collaborate, that's important. We also find that smaller, mid-sized companies tend to do a better job of this because the control over marketing and sales is more often centralized under one head of sales and marketing who can help bring the teams together. Larger companies that are more siloed, it can be a little bit more challenging. But again, there, I think it's shared collaboration among the functions to agree on targets and messaging, Wes?
I think an understanding, however, you can build an understanding between the two functions. I know Procter & Gamble has moves people back and forth between the sales and the marketing ladder as they progress in their career, so that when you get to the top and you're over sales and marketing, you have an understanding for both functions. Now, the research that we did for MSI, I mentioned, shows that a CRM system is the heart of this, but it's not enough. But in the CRM system, every marketing and sales, service and support, they all have to have access to the CRM system, and they have to be able to see that this is an important account and the activities that are taking place within the account. Another way to do it is to do what I call the diamond approach, where there's multiple function interaction across the two organizations between the supplier and the customer. So R&D may be in contact with the customer's R&D, senior executives in contact with the senior executives in the customer firm, sales and marketing interacting with procurement, supply chain management, that, especially in key account programs.
Yeah, that's a great point because, yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, and the last thing I was going to add is also the way that you create your incentives can also help to align the two functions. You know, in marketing and sales, oftentimes marketing is responsible maybe for the top of the funnel, and I'm judged on the number of MQLs I can hand over to sales in the course of a year. And sales may be judged, amongst other things, on what's my close rate from the MQLs to customers. In an ABM, it's more likely that both sales and marketing are given a common goal of how much revenue do we get out of these group of accounts. And how you get there is different, but the goal for both sales and marketing is the same.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think you mentioned that, Jeff, in your description of that process, and I think from my experience in seeing other companies, that really is the key, making sure they both have shared responsibility for the revenue growth and each contributes its expertise. A couple of more questions. One is, you mentioned in terms of content marketing, the various ways to get the message out. Are you observing trends in preference for one type of content? You mentioned that for videos, it can't be more than a couple of minutes. But given that variety of ways of getting the message out, are you seeing a kind of emerging trends where there's a preference for one approach or another? I think a lot of our members, a lot of our audience will be thinking about how to get their message out.
Well, I want to say two things about that. Number one is the most important thing is variety of content type. That's important. But then within the variety, what we've been finding in our analysis of content marketing and ABM programs we're doing is video is very, very powerful. 30 seconds is ideal. It should be as custom as it can be. It should be informative and provocative. Slideshows are also very strong. Infographics are good to round out the mix. And of course, curated content, if it's well selected and relates to the target, it can be a great way to, as we said, expand your total portfolio of available content, because the key is message, variety, and frequency, and mixing it up as much as you can. Time of day and time of day of the week are also important. When we get into the analytics, understanding when people are likely to tune in. Jip, we've got some experience around that as well, don't we?
Yes, we've done that with a number of clients, and sometimes find surprising results for doing it. But yes, we analyze that regularly. Best day of the week for ABM communication, I think, is? Well, it depends on the client and what the industry is. I mean, one client we eliminated Saturday only to find out that Saturday turned out to be the best for a period of time. We eliminated only to find out that was the best day. So we injected. Back to you, Earl.
Okay, yeah, one last question, sort of almost a philosophical point to wrap up. You indicated that the notion of ABM is relatively recent and kind of track the development of that idea. In my own experience, something like 25 years ago, I was doing work in consulting for IBM, and they were talking about solution selling, and it was all about delivering solutions for the client, understanding the business need, not simply pushing technology. And I'm wondering, maybe each of you or one of you, what is really has changed the most or is most different about ABM compared to the traditional approach, which, in many cases was still predicated on understanding the client needs, meeting the pain points, and so forth. So if you had to nail it down to kind of one or two things that are the most important differences about ABM, what would that be?
Well, I would say two things. Technology has enabled us to automate and streamline these processes fairly easily. And the second thing I would say, when you talk about the evolution from solution selling to today's approach, is the whole concept of challenger selling, doing your homework in advance, coming to the table prepared and comfortable with creating tension in the room and a different point of view than the customer might have, challenging the customer with still being polite and respectful. That's the biggest change we have, is that technology has enabled customers and prospects to be 70 to 80% down their decision-making role before you ever walk in the door. So that creates a bigger challenge on both the ABM communication and the sales effort as well.
Right. And with the data that's publicly available and that the software tools we have now, like CRM, we no longer have to throw out a net, a broad net, to see what we can catch in there. We can be very targeted with specific accounts. We can evaluate the potential of the account, and then we can develop a marketing program specific to each account rather than just casting a net.
Earl, I'd leave you with one thought. We tell all of our B2B clients that if they're not doing this kind of work, if they're not targeting specific executives with regular recurring messaging, then they're missing a real opportunity to raise their brand profile in the marketplace and create preference and interest in their company.
I think it's a great way to wrap up, guys. A great answer to the question. I want to thank you again for being with us. Thank our audience. We'll be sending out a recording of the webinar soon. If you have additional questions, you can follow up with Wes, Craig, and Jip at the email addresses on the screen, the last slide that we showed you. And I want to remind the audience that since 1961, nonprofit MSI has brought together the best minds in marketing from major corporations and top business schools around the world to improve business practice by applying science to marketing's biggest challenges. So we'll look forward to seeing you at our next Lunch and Learn series, and thanks again for joining us.